I'm Jay Pryor, and I'm an out entrepreneur.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. So, Jay, are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses?
You bet. Hi, Rhodes.
Hey.
Such a great honor to be on your show.
Yeah. Well, thank you for making the time. And for our audience, just a little bit about Jay. So Jay is a speaker, executive coach, and facilitator of corporate trainings and workshops around the world. They are a transgender and gender nonconforming advocate and educator for inclusivity and gender consciousness. So Jay, thank you for that work.
Thank you.
Yeah. And they also serve as the co-host of Doing the Work with Jay and Becca, a weekly podcast devoted to awakening people to their own power to transform their lives. So yes, fellow podcast host here, so you know the drill. You know how this goes, which is a lot of fun.
I do. Thank you so much, sir, for having me. And first of all, thank you for this podcast and for highlighting LGBTQ bosses, because I just, it's such a powerful work. And I do a lot of work with LGBTQ folks, and there's always that extra layer of kind of, I call it, I don't know, crud is the word that's coming to my mind right now. But,
yeah.
I'm always, my ultimate mission is to have people know themselves as loved and to love themselves. And I think that the LGBTQ population, that's like an extra layer of crud we have to deal with to get to that sometimes.
Yes.
Right. And so then to take ourselves on enough to be bosses is even a bigger, taking ourselves bigger. So I love that you're honoring that. So I just wanted to thank you and appreciate you for that.
Thank you. I love this. I feel like that is maybe that's the theme of our show right now, is love and acceptance. So I'm looking forward to peeling through the crud with you, and we'll go there.
Yeah. You bet.
But first, I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit more about your business, what you're doing in business, and what makes you unique, what makes you stand out.
Ooh, I am an executive coach, and I've had my own coaching business. I was just thinking about this, going for myself over some things before our interview, and August 5th, it'll be 13 years that I've had my own business.
Whoa, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm unhireable at this point. I pretty much have to work for myself because I don't think I'm pretty much done with that. So after 13 years working for myself, and my business has morphed and changed throughout time. Predominantly what I know is my superpower, what I'm especially gifted at, is having people be able to see themselves through a perspective that has them know themselves as powerful. Right, being able to get to a place where they can see themselves as having access to a different level of power than they had before they encountered me. So what I know is that when I'm with people, I get them to see themselves in a different light. I see them, and it's a more powerful light. It's an opportunity for them to embrace themselves at a different level. And that's a gift I have. And so that's what might make me unique. I know there's lots of coaches that do that and that help. That's part of what we do as coaches, is we hold that high watch for people and I see people as powerful. My ultimate goal is to see people as divine, always, like to see the divinity in you. But I always it's like something that I have, and I've flexed my muscle at and stretched myself. I am an expert at seeing people as powerful and able to handle their lives and able to fulfill and succeed on whatever they want. And then helping them figure out how to do that is, part of my skill too. But being able to really see that is something that's all over my business and all over my life. I work with executives. I work with entrepreneurs. I train. I also do a lot of coaching and speaking. A lot of speaking around being a transgender or gender nonconforming person. And then I work with parents around having kids who are gender nonconforming. Sometimes I'm the first person who calls that kid by the name that they prefer or by the gender they prefer when I'm dealing with parents, things like that. So I'm kind of all over the place. But ultimately, my business is all about lifting people up to know themselves as powerful and fulfill on whatever they want to fulfill on in their lives.
Absolutely. Thank you. I mean, you're doing really, really transformative work through whether you're coaching, one-on-one or speaking from the stage, and especially introducing audiences that might think that they don't know someone who's trans or non-binary, just being able to stand in your own power, share your story, that's transformative work as well. So I thank you for doing that. We certainly need a lot of that, just given that I think something like less than 15% of people in this country alone, only 15% supposedly of people living in this country know someone who is trans or non-binary.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting
statistic, because I mean, in the latest stats I've seen, writers, that now we've got 20%. Latest GLAD report, right, had 20% identifying as LGBTQ and 12% identifying as gender nonconforming.
Yep.
So that's a staggering statistic to think that there's not, that there's only 15% that know someone. So
it was less than that 10 years ago. It was in single digits, so I mean, that shows, right? Like, I remember the Time magazine article with Laverne Cox saying, this is the tipping point, right? And so, there's more, thankfully, positive visibility, at least on TV for right now.
Yeah.
And it's growing, right? So we're no longer the butt of every joke. And still, we're in this environment where it's challenging, especially after the 2016 election. So I'm sure we're going to go into that even more. I'm curious, though. I mean, you've been in business for 13 years. So you've exceeded, we work really closely with the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and they put out a report last year. And they said something like the average business that's owned by LGBT people is in business for 12 years. So you're above average. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You've gone to the other side.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. 13 years, you've talked about how your business has kind of morphed and evolved. Take us back to that moment where you said, you know what, I'm not working for anyone else anymore. I'm going to do my own thing. What was going on in your mind when you took that leap? And, were you motivated to start your own business because you had this huge idea, or were you tired of trying to fit into the workplace culture of someone else?
Well, a little bit of both and not. What I was really on a path for was having all areas of my life work. And so at the time I was living in DC, which I wanted to, you and I met initially in DC, and that's where I transitioned. And I was living in DC, and I was doing personal development work. I'd started doing transformational work, and literally everything in my life was working. Like, I had the best friends. I was early in my transition. I was so happy and loving life. I was married to the love of my life, still my wife, Jessica. She's my best friend. She's the love of my life. Like, I can't even believe that I get to be married to her. I'm so in love with her. It's unbelievable. Still, we've been married for 15 years in October. And so, everything in my life was working except for my job. And so, and even that, I was making good money, and I was working for a small furniture company who was owned by women, and they were fantastic to work for. I loved my schedule. I was making good money, but it was in the furniture industry, and I was literally the person who was in charge. I was a director of project management, and I was in charge of high-end wood installations in homes. So let's say you ordered a $30,000 desk or home office installed, and you got a scratch on your desk. I'd be the guy you had to deal with, right? So I didn't like that, and I was doing personal development, but my story was that I didn't know what I wanted. So I talk about this in my book, and part of my signature process is to start to have people start to understand that what they speak out loud is actually a complete correlate to what they believe about themselves. But humans don't really listen to what we say. We're not conscious of what we speak most of the time. And so part of my work is to have people start to become uber conscious of the things that they speak and the things that they think. And so I was doing personal development work at this time, and I was walking along with a coach, a dear coach friend of mine who has made a huge, powerful difference in my life. I was walking along with her, and I was complaining about my job. And she said these words to me, and I'll never forget them. She said, "Jay Pryor, for a powerful a person as you are, you need to do something about that or shut up about it." She literally was like, "Do it or shut up," And I looked at her, and I was just like, "What?" I said, "Well, if I knew what I wanted to do, I would do it." And her immediate response to me was, "You need to give that up."
Wow.
And I was like, "What?" And then I was like, "Give up that I don't know what I want to do." And as soon as I said, "Oh," I was being cocky. I said, "Oh, give up that I don't know what I want to do." I had a light bulb go off over my head that said, "Yes, you do need to do that." And so I made myself right then and there. I said to myself, I'm not going to say the word, "I don't know what I want" anymore.
Yeah.
And so anytime that conversation would come up, I literally on purpose would not allow myself to say the words, I don't know what I want. So, and it was such a habit that I would start to say, I don't know and I'd go, nope. And instead of saying that, what I started to say was, what I want is on its way. What I want is on its way. And I'm going to figure it out. I also got really committed and was highly intentional about finding something that would be fulfilling for me as a career that would also be a full self-expression of me, because it just wasn't. And it was the one area of my life that was not working. So I tell people this story and they don't believe me, but I promise it wasn't very long. Like, I just really didn't allow myself to say I don't know what I want. And I started saying what I want is on its way. And a month or so later, I was in a coaching program where I was doing some coaching for another organization, and all of my coachees were actually failing. Were failing miserably at this particular things, at the particular program. So part of the program was they were supposed to register people into this program. So that part they were failing at. But their lives were on fire. They were getting new jobs. They were falling in love. They were losing weight. They were every area of their lives were thriving. And so I was in this meeting where I was getting kind of called on the carpet about how my people were failing. And afterwards, someone came up to me and they said, Jay, you make a much better life coach than you do a coach for this program. Mm-hmm. And I said, life coach? What's a life coach? And they're like, a life coach, somebody that coaches you on your life. And I was like, that's a thing? We're like, yeah, that's a thing. So I'll never forget that day. I drove home that night. I ran in the house. I threw my backpack down. I went upstairs. I got online and started searching for this thing called life coaching, and found out that there were schools and that this was a thing. And as soon as I found out it was a thing, I knew, and it fit into all the criteria. Like, along the way, when I stopped saying I didn't know what I want, what I started focusing on what I do want, right? Which is, again, part of the tools of coaching. It's like, we know that what we focus on always gets bigger. So instead of starting to saying I don't know what I want, I started thinking about things I did want. And I knew I wanted to work from home, and I knew I didn't want to work for other people anymore. I'd been doing that since I was 11. And I wanted to be able to do my job from anywhere. And this was in 2004. So that was like starting to be possible, where people were like, oh yeah, you just have a computer and a phone. You could do your job from anywhere. So then when I found life coaching, it fit into all those things. And it was like, look at this. So then it was just about, enrolling my wife at the time in this idea of coaching school. And I did it. And I never had a doubt along the way that this was what I was supposed to do, because as soon as that idea came to me, it was like everything just lined up. I was like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. So that was 2038 and 2004. And I started my business in 2005. And I started out just coaching anybody who'd let me coach them. and then I got more into business and started coaching women executives in particular. And that was where me being a trans person was very helpful and powerful, because I noticed that I was coaching burnout women executives, and they were having different conversations with me than the men executives that I was having. But I could relate to the women because I had been a woman in business. Yeah. And so I started then focusing specifically on serving women and really having that conversation about that gender dynamic in the workforce. And that's where my book came from, and the whole Lean Inside process. So my book is called Lean Inside because I had a lot of women coming to me who had been leaning in for a long time and were exhausted, and worked over. So that's how that kind of got started. And then I focused on women and started doing women's seminars and really had that niche. And then over time, over the last couple of years, there's just been such a bigger and bigger need and request for me to go speak as an out trans person. I've been out as a trans person forever. That's always just been part of the deal for me to be out. But I've been asked more and more and more just as a need around my own local schools and things like that. So that's then what's kind of guided me now towards more of a gender consciousness conversation, which I've just gone off testosterone a couple of weeks ago, by the way. I took my last shot, and I've started to go by they, them pronouns, and doing a lot more education around the world of gender nonconforming now, especially in business and in organizations. So that's kind of the story.
It's an amazing story. And I think it goes to just how powerful words are, and that you had that evolution of recognizing subconsciously, I keep saying this thing, and I'm still confused about what I want. And you just that shift alone, someone, in your kind of business coaching program that you were doing talked about life coaching, and opened up a whole new part of your brain where you could,
completely.
where you could blend all areas of your life.
That it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And it has been fantastic.
Yeah.
And then that piece of, it's amazing to me when people walk up to me after I've spoken or after they've heard about my book or they've listened to my podcast, and they will come up and they'll say, gosh, I need to get your book because like I just can't blah, 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 right? And then the very first thing I say to them is, well, you have to stop saying that.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, stop affirming all the things you can't do.
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
you have to stop speaking that.
Mm-hmm.
What's fascinating is that weird world of human being that we don't make that correlate on our own.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't see that a lot. And
Right.
so that's part of my process is just having people get really, really, really uber conscious about what you speak.
Right.
Because it dictates your world.
Absolutely.
It's also the only way people know you. So we want to make sure to have people know you as powerful and, able. You don't want to speak about yourself like you can't handle things.
Right. Well, it shows how effective you are as a coach to be able to point that out to other people. And as you were talking, it made me think of this. I have this little phrase above my desk, and I can't remember all of it, but it goes to something like success is on its way. There's no need to fuss, just like keep, thinking about the things that you do want, the things that you do want to attract, and stay focused. You may not have all the answers around how you're going to do that. And people show up in your life, like that person who introduced you to life coaching. And
all the time.
Right, which is incredible. So I liked how you talked about how you started working with women executives and, your perspective on gender with that. You're clearly doing a lot of things that are lighting you up and really bringing great fulfillment for your work-life balance. Right now, in this moment where we are, what are you most inspired about? What's the thing every day that you wake up where you're like, I cannot wait to continue working on this, ... What is that?
It's this gender consciousness movement. And I'm essentially like making up this word, gender consciousness, which is simply what I say is the understanding or knowledge, the awareness, and then the understanding, and then the embodiment that gender is a construct, right? Because I know, and actually I know, because I've been speaking it a lot, I can sit down with almost anybody and have an intellectual conversation with them to have them get in the intellectual knowing that gender is a construct. But none of us live like that's the truth. And so it's that first level is that just like the willingness to say, oh yeah, I get that. It is a construct. But then there's a whole other world of starting to understand it, accept it, and embody it. And I think it is such an important, for me, it inspires me because it's pivotal for our future. Number one, I think that Gen Zers coming way behind us, they already got that figured out. Like if they're already there, it's the future, it's already coming. But for the people who are our age, or actually I'm older than you, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 52, so I'm 2 years under a boomer. I'm kind of an older Gen Xer, and for people my age and the boomers above us, especially, this is they can't even get their heads around this sometimes, right? It's so intense for them because gender's so real for them. So even just to get them at the level where it's a construct is a baby step in the right direction.
Yep.
But it's so important because it's killing off our kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It's killing off our kids. I mean, I've I think it's 59% of transgender people attempt suicide. We know that I think it's 46 trans kids are 46% more likely to attempt suicide. Yeah. I personally have tons of friends who, I have at least one personal good friend, and then friends of friends. Like I don't know any trans person who doesn't know people who have taken their lives. Young people are doing it constantly. And then we've got young cisgendered males who had a dramatic percentage. And I think I almost believe it's 25%, but I'm afraid to say it out loud because I read that recently and it was so stark that it was like, is that real? Yeah. 25% are not making it through high school because of the toxic masculinity and the uberness to be a man and all this, weirdness like that. Yeah. So raising gender consciousness so that we could be a more fluid people and have people not have their self-esteem wrapped up in how macho they are or things like that would be, to me, if I could make that difference, then that's a next notch on the level of personal transformation for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the work that you're doing is super powerful to be able to bridge that empathy gap of intellectually, yes, we understand gender is made up. And, if you're assigned female at birth, you must do these things. If you're assigned male at birth, you must do these things. And I think, our lived experiences of being trans people in the world is, it's a different perspective where we can add some tangible examples for other folks to see how gender also traps cisgender people in a way that doesn't feel good. And
No.
I think the more that you continue to play with this concept of gender consciousness, either on the stage or in the next book that you're writing, it's just going to help more people really recognize that they too can be more intentional about their own gender, how they create it,
Right.
how they express it, why they're doing that, without the assumption that they must perform gender in a certain way. And thank you. I think that the more of these conversations are needed. And what validation, right? I mean, living as a trans person for as long as you have, you've known all these things, right? And now more people are talking about, they want to hear from you, right? About your experiences. I think that's incredible. I mean, I couldn't have imagined this, 20 years ago when I was transitioning, right? It's a different world.
Not even close.
Yeah,
it's a totally different world.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing that I think is a beautiful piece of it is, the good news is that the next generation does already have such willingness and heart around this. I mean, it's just not, they're not willing to be put in a box the way, so one of my point is, the good news is, we're going to die off. The dinosaurs are going to die, and there will be this gender fluid piece. I just think that's what I know that I can be a leader in it. And, one of my gifts is having people get their humanity and also laugh at it, because it doesn't have to be so serious either. I mean, the reality is we just are silly about gender. I mean, we're just so silly about it. Yep. And we take it so seriously, and people just get so worked up. And so part of my gift always has been to lead by being someone who, I come from, I was raised in the poorest county in Kansas. Right. So a little bit of a rough town, and I have a kind of a foul mouth, and my own toxic masculinity that comes out of my mouth. Like I have to really watch, and I have been waking up to and evolving. And as a white person, I'm waking up and evolving. And as a queer and trans person, I've always been waking up and evolving. And so part of my deal is to put myself out there as somebody who's willing to step in it and learn. And create safe spaces for people to do that.
Yeah, I love
because
that.
I think part of the reason that we can't ever, we're so divided, is there's never a safe space to just learn. With so I am always willing to be like, okay, I'll be the guy to just step in it. I can clean it up. Because I'm good at. I know that my power lies in my vulnerability. I guess is the best way to say that. I learned that a long time ago, that my power lies in my vulnerability. And I know when I'm vulnerable, then no one can hurt me.
Yeah, and you're willing to go
out there.
Yeah,
and I'm willing to go there all the time.
And
all the time.
Because you're willing to go there and try, that may give other people confidence to do the same, rather than being scared of doing the wrong thing and then doing nothing and being complicit in the way things are, right? Yeah. And not trying to make them better. So this is awesome. This is awesome. Unfortunately, we have to go to a sponsorship break, when we're going to come right back. Hey, Outbosses. Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong. Okay, Jay, so the show is The Out Entrepreneur, right? So yeah. I want to go and kind of dig in a little bit more, as you said in the beginning of the interview, talking about some of our cred and some of our superpowers. I'm curious for you, if you can think of a moment over the past 13 years when you've been in business, running your own thing, where it has been difficult for you to be out as someone who is trans, a part of the LGBT community. And if you can think of a certain scenario where it was hard, if you can describe how you might have worked around it, just to give some of our listeners who are thinking about getting started in business and gauging how out they can be, a little more confidence to step forward and be more authentic in their work. Yeah.
And, it's interesting because I really want to encourage people to be get all your confidence and be as out as you can be in your business. When I first started my business, I had always been out, right? I've been out as a lesbian from the time I was 18. And then the only way that I could transition for me was like literally meeting with my therapist was about, what am I going to do about becoming invisible? Because I've been part of the queer community since I was a baby. Totally. This is my family. So it was very scary for me. So I at the time I called it losing my dyke card. It was like, oh no, I don't want to do that. Right. It was very important to me. And I was always woman identified too. So that was my other conundrum. Like, how do I manage this? So I've always managed it by being out. Yeah. So that's something to just know about. And so then when I started my business, initially when I would first coach people, they knew me personally. So they knew I was out. So that wasn't the conversation. But then as I started getting more and more business out and getting referred to people, that was never a conversation and it wasn't on my website anywhere. And so I wasn't out necessarily to clients, but not because I wasn't out. It was just because, we weren't talking about me. We were talking about them and their businesses. So it was things that never came up. And so there came a time when I wrote my book, that I basically was like, okay, so I have a few clients who I've had conversations with because it's been appropriate. And then I've had some clients who just don't know because we've just never had that conversation. And again, it wasn't a matter of like, I'm trying to hide anything. It was just like, well, that just wasn't part of the deal. We were just working on their business. So when I wrote the book, I knew that I had to come out to all my clients because in the book, I tell my story. And part of my transformational story is overcoming trauma as a young person who was suicidal and just raging suicidal in high school for being gay. So for me, overcoming being gay was way more intense than when I transitioned. I was already way over that, like it was not a huge deal. But for me, coming out as a young gay person in Southeast Kansas in the 80s was like, I ended up in a psychiatric unit. I was in there for 6 weeks. It was a lot of trauma. So that initially was starting my transformational journey. But then once I came out, transitioned, and then I had a year when I was 45 where we became foster parents. My dog died. My mom died. I donated a kidney. We got a kid with special needs. You name it, it happened. It was like, It was one of the most intense years of my life, which got me to one of the key pieces of my signature process, which I call constant forgiveness. And that is literally about me trying to show up perfect everywhere and not being able to manage it. And so it's that whole thing came together, that whole perfect storm came together. And then my book started coming out around that, because that's where I got my signature process. And I was like, oh yeah, I really want to write this book. But in the book, I wanted to be out. I was going to be myself. And I wanted people to know where I'd come from. I wanted people to know that I had started out suicidal and I'd been a psych. They'd transformed a lot in my life. And so the first chapter of the book is, who is Jay Pryor and why the heck would I want to listen to him? Mm-hmm. And so I knew that I was going to be, promoting this and sharing it with my clients. So I had to come out to them. And one of my clients was a very, very conservative CEO. He was in Oklahoma, and we just never had that conversation. And so I ended up taking him to lunch and coming out to him and having that conversation. And for me, being out has always been, and part of this is because for me, when I'm 18 years old and I'm in a psychiatric unit for trying to kill myself for being gay, and then coming to the other side of that, I had to be out. Like for me, it was like you're out or you're dead.
Yeah.
And so there was never, after that, I have never had an issue with just being out because I'm going to be out. That's just like, that's going to happen.
Yeah. And
so this was more about like, how do I be respectful and businesslike of this guy, but also be myself in my straight talk and be like, this is who I am. And so I did it one-on-one. And I just, like, for each of my clients that I hadn't come out to, I either took them to lunch or I scheduled a conversation that I scheduled on and their time. We worked it out so that, and I just told them, I've got some stuff I want to share with you and this is my life. And it ended up working. Rarely ever, I'm not saying I haven't been through some stuff because I've been punched square in the face for being gay. But in business, I have rarely had people have anything other than, respect and willingness to be in communication about it and wanting to know more. So I just, for the most part, think people need to be as straight in your communication as you can be, and then take what you get. And then anybody that's not in alignment with that, you don't want to do business with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's tons of fish in the sea. There's an abundance of business out there. And anybody that doesn't want to work with you because you're part of our rainbow family, move on. We got plenty of people to want to work with us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really great advice. And the model that you use of being publicly out, as someone who, at first blush, if people look at you, they may assume, okay, you're married to a woman, we're dealing with another cis white guy, right? And that you're willing to show up authentically and share your story, and that's a part of, your whole story, the transformation, and in the business that you are in as a coach. That just gives you even more credibility in your own journey and how you can help other people. So I thank you for sharing that. It's not always easy to kind of go back and talk about some of your own cred, as you say.
Yeah.
But I do think that is super helpful for people where we still have to negotiate that. And I'm sure even though you are publicly out, you've written a book, you have a podcast, you talk from the stage about your experiences of being trans. I'm sure you still encounter people who want to work with you, who may assume lots of things about you that aren't correct. And, that takes extra emotional energy to be like, hey, time out. let's have a conversation. I definitely encounter that in the work that I do. And it can be tricky when it's not necessarily a part of the business meeting, and yet you feel like something is missing in really developing that deeper relationship. So the show is also very strengths-based and heart-centered. And so I love that you were talking about your superpowers early on in the interview. And I'm curious, if you could expound on that a little bit more for the audience, given your lived experiences, given being a part of the LGBT rainbow family, do you view those experiences as something that allows you to stand out as a leader in business? Do you view those experiences as shaping your superpowers that you bring for your clients and people that you speak to from the stage?
Oh, yeah. The experience for me of having been a young lesbian and I speak about myself as female when I was a little girl, because for me, that's how I view myself then. I know I know some, because I'm a gender nonconforming person, I don't know if I should see myself differently, but I speak about myself as a little girl when I was a younger person. It's like I feel like I've morphed in and out of the gender spectrum all over the place. But having been a young lesbian, 0 role models, Ellen wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
And for me, how that manifested, I grew up in a tiny town of 500 people in Southeast Kansas, and I honestly believe that I had a mental illness. And I thought being gay was a mental illness. And so landing myself in a psychiatric unit and I drove my parents' car 100 miles an hour down a country road. I flipped it over. I tried to kill myself many times. I was very serious about it. And so landing myself on that psychiatric unit was the best gift that ever happened to me in my entire life. It was early. So I feel so blessed because I was 18. I was 18 years old, and I learned that I am in love with human beings, that all human beings are just, they're just love. I was in there with what is supposed to be the outcasts of all the world, right? All the psych. It was in a psych unit and I was 18, and I was on there with back then in 84 at 18, you were on an adult unit. So, most of the people on that unit were in their 40s and 50s and had been dealing with serious mental illness their whole lives.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like I got handed this amazing gift of looking at them and being like, oh God, what do I got to deal with? It was just unbelievable. I got gratitude. And I also got people going, kid, you're just gay. There's nothing wrong with you.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I got this unbelievable perspective on life at the age of 18 and all along the way then has been, for me, I came out of that psych ward. It was do or die. I was going to be out or I was going to be dead. And so I came out. And then once I came out, got involved as an activist early on. And so my whole world as an LGBTQ person has always informed everything I've ever done. And I'm so blessed. I mean, I feel like I kind of feel guilty sometimes saying this, but I always feel like we're kind of the special ones. I just really, the rainbow people are the really fun, creative, amazing, we are amazing human beings. And so getting to be part of that club for me has always been like, yes, I love this. And it makes me a better coach. It makes me a better parent. It makes me a better human. It makes everything. Because first of all, I've been witness to, pretty intense discrimination all around me. I have my best friend from when I was 18, unfortunately was gay bashed and now lives on disability in a trailer because she can't see, right? I could go on and on and on. The level of stuff I've seen, but navigated myself through and I'm able to lift other people up around because I've been there, but I know you can navigate through it. All of that to me has just been such a gift. And so, I do think that being a gender nonconforming, or I've always just called myself a queer, is always gives me a benefit in business and in life. And then this is outside of that rainbow, except for I do think that sometimes I also believe in part of my world is about being in alignment and being heart-centered and having myself. I call my book Being Aligned with Your Higher Self. Mm-hmm. My definition of transformation is chipping away at everything that's not your highest best self. So my other superpower is understanding alignment. Like that's what makes me the best coach, is like having that, knowing that alignment exists. And when I'm in alignment, I can't fail. I'm just, again, my vulnerability is my power, because when I'm in alignment, I'm untouchable.
Yeah. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier on, where you're talking about when you were working for the last time you worked for someone else, right? For the furniture company, you were looking to align all areas of your life and you knew something was off, right? And I think that's, it does connect to the rainbow family, where we're told, from a young age, we're assumed to be cisgender, we're assumed to be straight, right? And there's something that's not in alignment with who we are. Yeah. You're talking about the 80s in Southeast Kansas, that there weren't a lot of possibility models for you, showing you the way, right? So you're the architect of your own life. And I am. You, at 18, you had a really, really traumatic experience, and you were able to gain perspective from that and say, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to be authentic. And you did it. To me, that helps me see you as someone who has the grit, the tenacity, the perseverance to be the architect of your own business too, right? Like you've already, to me, that puts the business part in perspective. Like if you have these lived experiences that you've been able to transform, it's hard to run a business. And then you put it in perspective to the bigger parts of your life. And it's like, okay, I can do this, right? And
something that I'm really aligned with the millennials on, even though I'm not their age, is this idea that I am very clear. And this comes from my personal spiritual belief that I'm an eternal being, and so why am I here? I'm here to make a difference and have a good time, to be happy. I'm not here to suffer and to, but I know that inside of that, I get to make a huge difference. That's part of my mission. But my mission is also to be here to have a good time. So being an entrepreneur can be hard work, but I also I'm very passionate and inspired by having a work-life balance where I don't make myself work so hard. Like I spend time with my children. I spend time with my family.
Yep.
I really have a good balance in my life, and I'm not loaded. And that's there. I could be. I mean, I know how much money I could make if I wanted to work that a lot of hours, but I don't.
Yeah.
Like I don't have any interest in that.
Yeah.
My interest in is having a really quality of life via the people right in front of me. I love that 50 for me has been a time of figuring that out in a very powerful way in the last couple of years. It's just been like, man, I'm so happy that I have this life where I get to be with these people, in front of me. And that's really what's the most important. I think ever since the election, you said we'd touch back on that. And I know we would eventually, but that's the biggest takeaway for me around this election is be here now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest ways that, if you're not satisfied with the direction of where we're going as a country, a radical act of resistance is to find joy in everyday moments, right? And I feel like
I love that idea.
I feel that through this connection, I feel like your aura is exuding joy right now, and I want more of
love
that.
My life. I'm so blessed. I'm such abundance in my life of love and friendship and people and connection and getting to make a difference. And I'm so blessed in that way. And there's nothing that politically anybody can do to take that. And the good news is, I know what that causes. I know that I'm creating exponentially out of that joy. I get to serve others and create out of that. And I'm with you. I love the idea that you called it a radical. It is radical to be joyful right now.
Yeah. Yeah. To find joy in the everyday. I think that's something that I strive for, and I think that you exude that. So thank you.
Thank you. Having little kids helps with that.
Yes, right? Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to go into our bonus round where we're going to get the opportunity to learn a little bit more about Jay. We're going to gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work. And most importantly, we're going to learn how to stay in touch with Jay after today's conversation. All right, Jay, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
You bet.
All right, here we go. So finish the sentence for me. As an out boss, I believe.
Wow, that's a tough question. I believe so much stuff. As an out boss, I believe the most important thing is to question my own beliefs.
Question your own beliefs. That's super powerful. Is this kind of
don't believe all that stuff that you tell yourself.
Yeah, right.
Whatever you do, doubt the doubt.
Right.
Don't believe it.
Yeah, going back to just recognizing we're always evolving, right? So kind of checking in. Yeah. Okay. So do you have a mantra or a quote that you reference that helps you stay motivated in your business, especially when things get hard?
Yes, I have several. And the pretty much go-to phrase that I always have, and I have a sign up in the back of my car that reads backwards. It was a gift from one of my mentors, coaches, and teachers who has moved on and transitioned into the next life now. Her name is Enola Charity. She gave me a sign that says, things are always working out for me.
Yeah, that goes back, right? That goes back to what you say to yourself. I think that's awesome. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's a sign in the rear. Literally, if you look at my car in the rearview mirror, it says things are always working out for me.
Yes.
So I remind myself of that because as humans, we can however we're wired is where our heads go when we're stressed or under pressure, and we want to be really conscious of that wiring. And so most of us, nothing's happening at all. You're sitting in your chair at your kitchen table, but your head is out there, in anxiety situations and stress and all that kind of stuff. And we forget that really things are always working out for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
They always are.
That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Can you share one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
Yeah. Prayer and meditation for me is key.
Nice. And do you do that every day, or what's your practice with that?
I don't want to lie and say I do it every day because I haven't this week.
Yep.
When I am, but in perfect world, yes, every day. And nature every day is another one the perfect world. I would get out in nature on my bike, preferably. But prayer and meditation for me is about connecting up and reminding myself who I am, not what I am or what anybody else thinks I am, but who I am. And for me, I know that who I am is an eternal inner being that has absolutely all possibility in the world. And so if I can ground myself and connect to that early on the day, then that really guides and leads me throughout the rest of the day. If I miss that step, then I'm more likely to be the thoughts in my head can be different, things like that. But for me to ground and get myself connected up to what I call my source, just my highest self.
Yeah.
That's my biggest practice.
I missed the biking part, so we're going to have to talk about that after. I'm like, yes, all biking. Okay. Yeah, nature is
I know
huge.
you're like a super biker, right? I'm kind
of any excuse to be on a bike, I don't care. I'm out there.
Yeah,
so,
no, me too.
Yeah,
I love the bicycle. For me has been, in terms of fitness, like it's one of the topics I talk a lot about with women is body consciousness and body shame, because I was a woman who had a lot of body shame.
Yeah.
And then when I transitioned, I thought, oh, that's going to change, right? Because that's about me being, these feelings. Then I just was a guy with body shame. So
yeah. Yep.
So I really have transformed that. And part of that was finding exercise that I liked, and getting back on a bicycle like I was a little kid for me was huge. It was like, yes, I love this.
Yeah, there's something, that brings you to your younger self. I mean, for me, definitely, I'm like, oh, I'm 5
I ride without hands all the time.
Yeah. Wear your helmet.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of out bosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
What I was trying to think about that. Like, what would I want somebody to tell me? First of all, you are not your brain. You are not your body. And what we know about neuroplasticity is that we can teach ourselves anything. Like, we know now that the brain is plastic enough that there's nothing, like if you decide you want to learn French, you decide you want to play the guitar, you can do that, right? Because you have a plastic brain that can just, if you practice enough, it will form a new cortical pattern, right, on your brain.
Yep.
I want people to know that there's nothing they can't figure out and learn if they just don't quit and keep going at it.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Because I didn't get that. I mean, I really thought, well, there's just some people that are special. No, that's not true. Nobody is special. Like there's nobody, unless you have some brain damage or, there's something neurologically unbalanced. Anybody who has your average brain can create a new cortical map in your brain just by repetition.
Yeah. Yes.
And so there's certain things, of course, we want you to hire a coach and find teachers and go help them figure out what to repeat. But there is nothing you can't figure out how to do if you're just willing to not quit and stay at it. You can do anything you want. Your brain is designed to absolutely help you do that.
I love that. I love that. I want to keep talking to you because I feel like I'm getting...
I love neuroscience.
Yes.
I'm a big neuroscience nerd because I just find it fascinating that thing, all the things it does.
Yes. Yeah. I'm with you on that. I think just our abilities are so much more than what we think we can do, right? And
yeah. Well, and it's funny because by accident, what I did, I just discovered this in this past year because I took a course called the Neuroscience Academy, and I just loved it. I don't know if you're familiar with that course, but it's really great for coaches. And it's a course for coaches who are neuroscience nerds but don't know enough about it, like to speak intelligently. So Dr. Sarah McKay teaches this course. I just loved it. But what I learned was that my signature process aligns itself with cognitive behavioral therapy in the sense that we create a mantra, we get in action, like all those things. And then she had taken her course. I learned that neuroplasticity and cognitive behavioral therapy really line up with each other because it's that idea of the repetition of the mantra and the action that just creates the new cortical map. So I'm like, by accident, my signature process kind of aligns up with cognitive behavioral therapy. Because the whole idea is that you just got to keep practicing and you can get better at it and create anything.
I want to look into that course. So Neuroscience Academy. So
yeah, the Neuroscience Academy, Dr. Sarah McKay, you will love it.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. All right. So I'll include that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Which leads me to, sadly, my last question for you, Jay. I've loved our conversation. So thank you for your time. Where can we find you so that we can learn all about your book and just, where we can get coached by you?
Yeah, my website is www.jpryorcoaching.com. You can find me there and find me access everywhere else from there. And then I believe that what I'd like to do for your listeners is I have my book. I recorded my book on audio. So I wrote the book, I think it came out in 2014 or 13. And then a couple of years ago, or just last year, I recorded it. And the recording is kind of an update. Like if I had written that, I say things like, well, if I had written that now, I would say this differently. Because I always try to reserve the right to change my mind.
Yeah.
Because I am someone who grows and changes too. So I recorded the audiobook, and what we'll do is we'll send you a link with a code that's like Lean Inside Now or something code, and then we'll have I can just give you a free copy of the book so people can get that too.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you for that gift. That's really, really generous. So listeners, definitely take advantage of that. Again, we'll have that on our show notes. So Outbosses, everyone tuning in, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Jay. So for details from today's conversation, please check out the show notes at www.outentrepreneur.com. You can also text 444-999 and type in OUTBOSS, and you can stay in touch with the show that way. And as a next step, consider subscribing to the podcast, leaving a rating and review in iTunes, and definitely be sure to share the show with a friend or a loved one. And as always, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.